Okay, everyone. I believe we're ready to begin. I would like to welcome all to the RCOY, the Regional Conference of Youth, North America and the Caribbean 2026, under our theme, From Community Realities to Multilateral Action. We gather today to build a unified evidence-based mandate for global climate policy. We are thrilled to bring together young leaders, policy experts, and advocates across our region, and to anchor our mission directly within the official United Nations climate process, because I would like to remind everyone that this is an official and UN-endorsed meeting convened by YONGO, the official youth constituency by the UNFCCC. And that's why we will now view a special video statement sent by the UNFCCC's Presidency Youth Climate Champion, the PYCC. Carmen, could we please share the statement? It's not sharing.
don't know why it's not sharing.
Just grab it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Failed to share.
Let me see if I can. Yeah, it says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
Or we could watch it afterwards if it's not working.
Yeah, we could, although we would need to share the screen if we want to show the slides from the.
I can just speak it also.
Yes, I think the only problem is video. Sorry. That.
Made it. It worked, right?
Screen share, but not the video.
Video.
Should we write in the chat what's going on?
Or if you grant me access to share. Share information. Share. You should be able to share transfer calls. Stop sharing.
We apologize for the technical inconvenience.
Okay, technology sometimes fails.
There you go.
Now the sound.
Ponlo nomás con.
Creo que no tienes.
Pero tiene subtítulos.
Tienes.
Sorry. Jorge, maybe he can help me.
We would like to
Play a video. Okay, is the video playing? But there's no sound. Okay, if I may.
she came out. She's like,
You connect. So you're the one sharing your screen, correct?
That's me.
I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay.
also
We're gonna do the window.
she's like,
And then share. I'm gonna try it out one more time. Mass, do you have some downloaded on your computer?
Yeah, it's here where it won't open.
I think that the screen share is working, so it might just make sense to do
The subtitles.
Huh?
Like we can play it with the subtitles only.
or we can do it after, or the subtitles, or we can share the video afterwards too.
So
Yeah,
audio does work better like if it's using the actual not the browser. Sometimes it's issues with the browser.
Or like, I'm happy to speak with no presentation. So people
Come find me though if
lose the audience.
you want to try the video.
Thank you.
Climate policy and to the COP30 Hi everyone, I'm Sally Higgins, the COP.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
we have Sally.
Hi everyone, I'm Sally Higgins, the COP31 Presidency Youth Climate Champion. My job is to connect children and young people from all over the world to international climate policy and to the COP31 Presidency team. Climate change is already impacting the lives of children and young people all over the world. I'm a farmer from Allara, a small town in regional Australia, and I see climate impacts firsthand. Hotter days, unpredictable rainfall, floods and more intense storms. But this isn't just happening on my farm, it's happening all around the world. And it's costing our young people and children their health, safety and future opportunities. But in my role as the Presidency Youth Climate Champion, I have seen something powerful. Young people everywhere are stepping up, taking action to address climate change, building solutions, driving innovation, and creating change in their communities, across industries, and within the systems around us. And some of the most powerful leadership that I have seen is happening at the community level, in places like the Pacific, where climate action is rooted in culture, connection to land and to ocean, and in a collective resilience. Our communities show us that the most effective solutions aren't always the biggest or the loudest. They're the ones that are local, inclusive, and led by the people who live the reality of climate change every day. So as the Presidency Youth Climate Champion, you can think of me as your connector, linking the incredible leadership of young people on the ground to the international spaces where decisions are made and where the direction is set. My focus is to strengthen the role of children and young people in climate action, moving beyond consultation, but towards genuine partnership, ensuring that young leaders aren't just part of the conversation, but a part of shaping and delivering solutions. So my message to young people everywhere is this: start local. Start with the places that have shaped who you are: your community, your land, your river, your ocean, your park, your beach. Because climate action doesn't happen in conference rooms, it happens in the places that we call home. And for me, that's on my farm and in my community. But where is that for you? What place in nature do you love? What do you want to protect and enjoy, not just now, but into the future, for our children's future and for our grandchildren's future? So we need to speak up about the places that we care about, to protect them, to show others why our future depends on them. And as we head into COP31 in Turkey, this is our moment to lift ambition, to back youth leadership with real action, resources and power. So the opportunity is here, and so is the responsibility. Let's not wait for the future, let's change it together.
We appreciate the contributions shared by the PYCC. I forgot to introduce myself as well. My name is George, Jorge in Spanish. I collaborate in an organization named Agora. We promote public policies centered in peace, in social justice, in the Sustainable Development Goals. And today we're co-hosting the RCOY. And actually, last year we shared with the latest PYCC, Leila Hasanova, during a roundtable organized by the UNFPA at the General Assembly session September 2025. And it's great to know that we're being able to collaborate and continue communicating with the stakeholders in charge of increasing youth participation in UN decision-making spaces, now with Sally this year. Okay, moving forward, we can begin with our panel. Today we will explore how local frontline realities intersect with high-level policy, finance, energy, water, law, and human mobility. And I will present each of our six distinguished panelists with their bio before directing a targeted question to each. Our first panelist joining in person today is Carmen Capriles. Carmen is an agronomist and environmental justice advocate with nearly 2 decades of leadership in sustainable development, agroecology, and climate action. As the founder and general coordinator of Reacción Climática, she bridges frontline community realities with international diplomacy, focusing on climate change, biodiversity conservation, and indigenous rights. She's an expert negotiator and technical advisor in major UN frameworks. She leverages strategic vision and intercultural dialogue to empower grassroots networks and inform global policy. Carmen, thank you for being here with us today. And this is a question that we prepared. As an agronomist and advocate bridging frontline realities with UN diplomacy, how do we operationalize loss and damage funding so that it actually reaches the local level rather than getting stuck in bureaucratic transit? Carmen, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jorge, for the question, and thank you for the invitation to be in this important space. Let me see if I can share my presentation. I try to have some slides to make it more interactive. Browser encounter an error. Yeah, something's going on today with the
technology is not working on our side.
Yeah.
Upload the presentation in the folder that we have, and I can.
No, it's okay. Well, most of us know what the COP is, the conference of the parties to the UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Convention on Climate Change. So why is this so relevant for us and basically for our generation is that it's one of the biggest challenges that we have to face. We live in a world that's very hungry for energy. We have energy at our disposals that neither our grandparents had, and probably if we don't take care and we don't do the right measures, our grandkids are not going to have the amount of energy that we are consuming right now. And that is shown in many of our lifestyles, how we move, the kind of vehicles that we drive, and the amount of fossil fuels that we consume. And that amount of fossil fuels, it's not only the price that we get in the ticket or that we get in our invoices. The price, the environmental price, is much higher, and that is being reflected first in global warming. Many of you have seen fires all around the world. Before, you could only hear about fires probably in Africa or Latin America, but now we hear them in LA, in places like LA in the US, or in Canada, or in Spain, or in Italy. So what's going on? Is this normal? It shouldn't be. But the fact is that all that fossil fuels that we've been accumulating in the atmosphere has made the atmosphere a lot more hot. And that's turning our biosphere into a fuel. And that's why we're starting to see fires everywhere. That's the whole thing about global warming is not that it's the temperature rises, but the fires rises. And we see that every day in the news. But the planet is not, it's kind of like a living thing. Many of us cannot explain why the average temperature of a human being is 37 degrees. That happens the same with the planet. We cannot explain why the optimal is 15 degrees. But as humans, we have decided that we're going to allow it to be 2 degrees hotter. But imagine as a human being going to work with a 40-degree fever. That would be around like 100 and something degrees in Fahrenheit. So when you have a fever, you cannot go work. Probably you're going to have to take a leave. Probably you're going to have to stay home and take a rest until your temperature goes back to normal. But we're not applying that principle to the planet. So we are like, okay, we're going to allow this planet to heat until the 2 degrees. That's basically what the Paris Agreement says. And the planet has all these mechanisms to lower the temperature, as we do. When we have a fever, we have a lot of symptoms and a lot of phenomena that happen in our body to try to lower the temperature. And that's what climate change is that effort of the planet to release that heat that we have. And that's reflected first in storms. It's like when you go inside a room and you turn on the fan, and that's how you lower the temperature, or you would turn on the AC. And we have the ENSO, which is the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, that absorbs the heat. Right now, we're facing a Super Nino because the ocean is absorbing all that heat, extra heat that we have in the planet. So, and that's been reflected in floods, that's been reflected in droughts in some places, especially in South America. And that those are like the consequences of this global warming, and they are reflected on this climate change. So this Super Nino that's been called Nino Godzilla, that was born on June 21st, and we are in the middle of it. We don't know how much it's going to last, is one of the consequences of this thirst that we have for energy. So there's a number of measures going on within the negotiations, starting by a text that, as I already explained, the 2 degrees solves nothing, but still we need to face all these consequences. One of the key issues is we try to do that through mitigation and adaptation. Adaptation is try to be fit, to be ready for whatever comes, and mitigation is trying to lower the gases that are heating the planet, basically. We are failing in both of them. We have tried to make this finance mechanism to support especially developing countries that cannot face these damages alone. And there is the negotiations in Turkey this year are going to be based on loss and damage, for example. This mechanism that is focused on when you have to face this kind of like climate change impacts like droughts or floods or something like that, especially in countries in the south that cannot recover easily. So the thing about loss and damage is that it's a mechanism that we still, when a disaster happens, you need immediate action and you need immediate funding. And that's what we're seeing, for example, in what happened with the earthquakes in Venezuela and now in Colombia. So they need the help right now. Problem is that it becomes so bureaucratic that the finance has to go to different entities until it finally can reach the people affected. And by that time, the disaster is already over, people have recovered, people are moving on, and what happens with the money? So the thing is how you make an effective mechanism that can allow you to put money and access money right when you need it. And the problem is that many of these communities that need the most resources to face this kind of like impacts, they do not have internet. They do not, they're rural communities, they're isolated, they don't have means of communication, they don't have, they've been like marginalized for a lot of reasons. We can talk about indigenous communities, we can talk about Afro-descendant communities that have been neglected by many of the governments. And many of them are the ones that need the most. So I think one of the biggest challenge of the COP around finance is going to be how we make this loss and damage fund really effective in reaching the communities that are affected when the disaster happens. So we don't have to be waiting and money get lost in all these bureaucratic processes from going one place to another and not reaching the people that are being highly affected. And I think that's one of the challenges this year, particularly that we're facing this Niño Godzilla, because we had Super Niños before, but I think that the challenge right now is to see this kind of communities, to work with them, to make them ready, and to have an eye on them until they can, if something happened, they can recover and they can move on. And not only the alternative is migration. And we know that migration is a problem all over. So the best way to stop migration is working with local communities so they can access all the services, they can access, they can be ready, they can adapt, they can help with mitigation, but they have all the means to survive whatever happens, and that the rest can like have a security support for these communities. And I think that would be the challenge for Turkey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carmen, for emphasizing how crucial direct access is for frontline communities suffering from climate change, especially the territories in the global south affected by floods and other disasters. Your points set a strong foundation for our policy statement. Now we turn to our next panelist, who is also with us today, but virtually, Omar. He is a Syrian youth advocate and sustainability professional currently working in corporate social impact at Kindred. With a background in youth advocacy and federal environmental policy, he has engaged in international forums, including COP and Youth for Climate. His work reflects a commitment to lifelong learning, adapting to complex challenges, and creating meaningful impact in both corporate and policy spheres. Omar, thank you for joining us. Given your work in corporate sustainability and federal policy, what role must the private sector play in financing and implementing sustainable decarbonized systems for resilient cities, and how can youth hold them accountable?
Hi, Jorge and everyone. Thank you so much for having me, and apologies for not being able to be in person today. So quickly, a few things that I would say. Moving from working with youth directly or being part of things such as RCOY, which I still am part of, to working on the corporate side, I've noticed differences in lots of things, mainly because, how would I say, in the corporate world, there's a lot of focus on compliance. And when I say it would be compliance with things such as the CSRD, Dora, as well as many others. And as you know, working at a tech company today comes with lots of things, especially in the responsibility side. When you're looking at things such as data centers. Data centers consume a lot of water. This has been one of the things that has been a concern, how would I say, from my side as a person coming into a tech company, as well as lots of climate advocacy groups. Um, what I would say is, as youth, one thing that we can do specifically, whether that's you in the workplace or you elsewhere, it would be, how would I say, first things first, listen to what they're saying, at least at my company, and then try to meet with them one-on-one, bring in your thoughts after doing some research, and offer them initiatives, solutions like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, doing that. And one example for that would be when you're looking at how would I say data centers specifically. I've worked on a research project where it was essentially we would go and look at water stress areas where we might be located. And from there, how would I say, would be like, okay, we would have this impact, or um, you would need to change your strategy when it comes to impacting the community from doing social initiatives and more. And for us as youth, what I would say, especially if you're at a large corporation, the issue is lots of times you would feel intimidated, but the reality is they'd be ready to listen to you, especially if you're working in sustainability. And if you're not, reach out to a sustainability team at your company and come with a plan to them. That's one thing that I would say, and especially do your research. Now, on the federal side of things, what I would say is people don't call their representatives enough. And I'm saying that here specifically in the US. Throughout my experience working at Congress and the Senate, one of the things is that we do get calls from people, but the calls that make the most impact is when you are requesting a meeting, for example. But when you're requesting a meeting, you're telling us, hey, I've done research on X, Y, and Z. And like, is there an email? I would like to send you something. And then you could meet with a staffer. Once you meet with a staffer, this staffer would, how would I say, bring in your message and share it with hopefully your representative, be it a senator, be a congress member, and this to you quite literally participating with them and advising them on a bill. So all of that does take a lot of time. It takes a lot of courage, and I will say it is not easy. You will get lots of no's, especially as members of the youth community. Um, I would say not lots of times we're taken seriously. That's one issue. But the reality is, when you come prepared with your data points, with your research, and confidence also, they are willing to listen to you. Maybe not the first time or the second time, but at times the third time, and if not, then the one after. Um, so be confident, reach out, do your research, and also listen to what they're saying and try to see how you can speak their mind language. This is one thing. Every person would speak in a different way, from corporations to people in the federal government to advocates, and you need to work with someone based on what their goals are, essentially, but at the same time feeding to your goals. And in my case, it would be how can we create a more sustainable world with both resilient cities, as well as alleviate the pressure on water stressed areas, especially in a world where data centers are consuming a lot of water. Um, so be confident, do your research, and do reach out. And thank you.
Thank you, Omar. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Daniel Kamen, who is the Bloomberg Distinguished Professor of Energy and Climate Justice at Johns Hopkins University, a world-renowned energy scientist, former U.S. science envoy, and coordinating lead author for the IPCC. He's a pioneer in renewable energy deployment and just energy transitions. His work combines advanced energy systems modeling with practical implementation to accelerate decarbonization, expand energy access, and advance equitable climate policy worldwide. Dr. Kamen, welcome. This is a question that we prepared for you. How can youth in the Americas best advocate for a just energy transition that balances decarbonization with the immediate energy access needed for our most vulnerable communities?
Oh, well, thank you so much. And can I share my screen to show slides, or should you put them up?
If you can,
Could you try?
Absolutely. Let me try to share right now. I've just asked for permission. Let's see if you can grant it. And
Yeah.
can
I
you
see your-
now see my screen? Oops, sorry, something just closed. Let's try this again. Okay. Hopefully you can see the screen, and I just want to thank you for inviting me to be here. I think probably the most depressing thing I have to say is right in the beginning, and that is I have attended 21 of the 30 COP meetings. And I'll come back to that, why that's such a depressing statement later, in just a minute or two. So, as we think about the question that you asked, how can youth advocate for a just energy transition that balances decarbonization with energy access? I actually think I was given the easiest question of the group because there's a very, very simple approach and solution, which I'll try to highlight. So let's simplify the process. And that is, I agree with Omar that you must do your homework, you must understand the issues. But thankfully, right now, the information available is quite direct. And in my case, starting again, my first COP was in 2004. And so this is a curve that many of you have seen. This is the rising climate temperature, the so-called climate stripes. And you can see along here all of these climate meetings that we've had. The Kyoto meeting, the Paris meeting, the Copenhagen meeting, the one coming up in Turkey, all these meetings. And you see that the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere has continued to rise, getting more and more serious. And so, what you heard in the first talk about the 2-degree target, and I was part of the US delegation that negotiated the 2-degree number down to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Well, right now, the world is on a path for 3 or 3.5 or 4 degrees. And US invasions of other countries do not help, of course. So we have a commission. We need to translate the science into action. I've been part of the IPCC. We were pleased to share the Nobel Peace Prize for our work. But as you'll see, we have not been very successful despite nice prizes. So I think that this very simple cartoon from The Simpsons, hope many of you have seen, it really sums up the translation of all of this climate science into action, and that is we've really had no action. This year has been the hottest summer of my life. Well, this is the coolest summer of the rest of your life. And so this sadly is the gift that my generation is giving to your generation. So you should be quite angry. As we think about what to do about it, it's actually not that difficult. But I think something that we need to keep saying, and that the youth have the strongest voice in saying, is that if you look at this global distribution, what this says is the richest 1% of the world contribute about 15% of all emissions, and the richest 10% of the world contribute over half the emissions. And the poorest half of the planet over here on the right in green contribute less than 10%. So this is a rich person, rich country caused problem. The rich countries benefited from the use of fossil fuels, but today are very uninterested in actually solving the problem. And so that's really the setup. And that to me, that says is that without climate justice, not only between men and women, for minority groups, for poor people, but also across generations, what we call academically intergenerational inequality or intergenerational equity, if we would get there, are really critical. But we're not doing that as a global society today. Right now, it's clear that my generation and the generation one younger than mine do not really care about your generation because we're making choices that are ruining the planet that you are inheriting. There are bright spots. I don't want to only be depressing. In California, for example, California is the world's fourth largest economy. And as you can see here, from 2012 to today, California has ramped up from 1% of our electricity from solar to over 50%. We're the largest economy in the world driven majority energy by solar. And you can see there are swings during the year. So it's not just about clean energy because of course we have something called nighttime. So we need energy storage. But also in California, here we see that energy storage, like in Texas, like in Norway, like in Bangladesh, like in Kenya, are all becoming a major part of the story. So on March 31st of this year, California met 42% of its energy demand in the evening, and that's when the demand is highest because businesses and homes are both turned on. California met 42% of total demand with energy from storage. And basically, all of that came from solar, wind, geothermal energy. And I say that because California right now is about 70% powered by clean energy. And so we're not a small economy. If California can do it, literally anyone can do it, rich or poor, as I'll get to in a second. So I don't want to dig into energy markets, but you should know that the energy markets we have in the world today are not designed to benefit clean energy. They're designed to benefit fossil fuel energy. But even in that, you can see in the pink, these are batteries across the US West, California mainly, charging up, and the blue is discharging. And what you see is that the price of power across the Western United States has dropped to zero or negative because of all this clean energy at certain times of the day. And even in Texas, a fossil fuel state, you can see the price drop to zero. The US East Coast is a problem, like many countries are problems. But we know that energy markets are designed for the old economy, not the new one. Even in that world, clean energy is really doing very well. And so that brings me to both the answer of what I would recommend that youth do. It's very similar to what Omar has suggested. And of course, many of you have seen this picture of Greta Thunberg, but it's also Vanessa Nkate in Uganda, Alexandra Villaseñor in California. There are many youth leaders who have done their homework and have said, I'll start off with a school strike for climate. That's what her sign says, of just her sitting in front of the Swedish parliament. But as we know, the youth movement has grown, although the people of my generation are not making your job easier. We invite you to meetings to show off there's a youth. We do not then give you a meaningful seat at the table. So my generation truly deserves to be sued by your generation for misrepresenting how inclusive we are being. We're not. We are holding back money from climate adaptation. The idea that we'll talk about this climate adaptation fund in Turkey is true, but honestly, this is just a small side note to the fact that the rich countries continue to pollute dramatically and are not putting meaningful money into the process. So you shouldn't abandon the process, but you should recognize the process today is largely garbage. It's largely basura because we are not making meaningful change of money from the rich to the poor or from my generation to younger generation. So I would say the steps are very simple. They are we should, or you, but I hope to help, you should learn, you should organize, participate, and speak out. And in particular, it's critical that the youth vote. And I say that because old people, their views are largely locked in. They might make a few small changes, but youth are underrepresented in every election worldwide. And this is critical. I live half the year in Kenya, where the population is largely under the age of 25. If they were to vote in mass, they would change the decisions in the country. And I say this as someone who has battled. This is just a collage of images from when I was the science envoy for President Obama, and then I resigned when Mr. Trump came in. Mr. Trump is no friend of youth and no friend of climate. Maybe he's a friend of youth on Jeffrey Epstein's island, but he's not a friend of youth in general. But this is some of the backlash when I said we are not on the right path. And so I resigned my position under Mr. Trump, but it highlights that you will suffer some of these attacks. Last point is that energy access and clean energy are cheaper than fossil energy. They produce more jobs than fossil energy. This is from a paper we did now almost 10 years ago, just showing there's almost 700 million people on the planet without clean energy today, without any electricity today. But clean energy is now cheaper than fossil energy, although my generation subsidizes fossil energy. And I just show some of the examples of projects we've done from Afghanistan to Kenya to South Sudan to a project in Colombia. All of these are examples of deploying clean energy at costs lower than fossil energy. And so the argument about cost is not there. The argument about political connection is there. And so my final thought would be if we really invested in clean energy the way we could, I actually think that we could live in a world where a third of our power is solar, a third of it is not nuclear fission, not uranium, but the newest emerging technology, fusion, which is probably 10 years away, and that the remaining third would be wind and geothermal and perhaps small amounts of carbon emitting sources that we capture the carbon. But I'll highlight this because we now know fusion works. Of course, if you look up at the sun, fusion works. We now have fusion working in California at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, but we need many innovations, and my generation is standing in the way of many of these opportunities. So sadly, if you want to take a stand and work on clean energy in the climate process, you'll have to move ahead, and often at the opposition of my generation, which is not being helpful in this process. I list here the linkages for my laboratory, for the podcast we do, but really I encourage you to do exactly what Omar said. Learn, engage, vote, and be ready for people in power not to be useful because the climate process is one really designed to maintain the status quo, not to move positively to your generation. So thank you for the chance to speak, and I hope this is not just depressing, but also hopeful and inspiring. And I'll put the link from my website for my laboratory here if you're interested to participate, to come to some of our workshops. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kamen, for grounding energy justice in the immediate realities of community access and equity. Your insights make it evident that we need to increase diverse perspectives and integrate perspectives like yours in spaces such as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and youth voices too, right? If we want to ensure that our future is shaped by those who will inherit it. Now, staying on the virtual stage, we will hear from Dr. Christopher Costas. He serves as the Arizona Water Program Director at the Environmental Defense Fund, leading strategic efforts to secure resilient, sustainable water systems. He's a member of the Arizona Governor's Water Policy Council, specializing in water management, governance, and social ecological systems, working collaboratively with farmers, tribes, and local governments to ensure policy decisions reflect community values and build long-term climate resilience. Dr. Costas, are you there? Yeah. Thank you. Let me see the question. Thank you for being with us, and your work involves complex stakeholder groups, tribes, farmers, and governments, as I just said. How do we ensure that resilient cities planning doesn't leave rural or marginalized voices out of the governance process?
Thank you, Jorge. Good morning. Buenos dias. Are you all able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. All right. Well, thanks to everyone here, and thanks to the leaders here, the young leaders and leaders who are young at heart. Thanks for everything you're doing in this process. So to start, I'll share a little bit about myself. I'm from a small town in northern Arizona in the southwestern US. My family migrated here from what used to be Czechoslovakia, and my grandparents and parents worked very hard so that my sisters and I would have opportunities here that they never did. I grew up exploring red rock canyons in this region, fishing in small creeks with my dad and my grandpa. And now I have a 2-year-old daughter. And I want her to have even better opportunities than I've had. And that includes the opportunity to fall in love with the magical landscapes here and our communities in this part of the world. But whether her generation and future generations will have that opportunity depends on water security. And that's how I approach my work as the water program director with Environmental Defense Fund. Our mission is water security for all people for generations to come. So I'll start my comments just with an idea that water security is a lot more than engineering and policy. It's also about communities having the power to shape their own future. I think about the human right to water in the same way. The human right to water is about more than pipes and faucets. Of course, those are essential, they're super important. But the human right to water is also about dignity, opportunity, and people's freedom to choose their own future. And I just want to point out to you all in this process that the ability of people to choose their own future, groundwater, the water beneath us, below the ground, is absolutely central to that. So billions of people around the world, including people in my community, depend on groundwater. That includes many of our rural communities and the farming regions where we grow our food and that are most vulnerable to climate change. And our groundwater supplies in these places are declining rapidly. And as our world gets hotter, groundwater is becoming even more important to our ability to adapt and continue living in the places that we love. So I would look at groundwater as central to the human pursuit of self-determination. If a community loses access to the water beneath it, it loses the ability to decide what its own future looks like. So when we talk about resilience, it's about more than how much water we have. It's also about who gets to decide what the future looks like and who has the power to make those choices real. For Indigenous peoples, that means sovereignty. Tribal nations are sovereign nations with unique rights and relationships to water that need to be acknowledged and respected. For our rural communities, water security and resilience means self-determination, and our rural communities are increasingly getting organized in more places around that idea. I worked for a good period of time in Central America, and I saw rural drinking water systems get organized across regions to earn new recognition from central governments. And here in Arizona, for longer than I've been alive, many of our rural communities have had no ability whatsoever to manage the groundwater beneath them. So people have watched wells go dry, land sink, homes actually crack in half as the land sank beneath them. Livelihoods have slipped away, and in some cases, I've had partners in areas where neighbors have had to share water with each other in jugs or even take bucket showers because groundwater loss has been so significant. But that is changing here. Residents and farmers started organizing several years ago. Neighbors started talking to neighbors. They started showing up at public meetings. They built coalitions across communities, across regions. And people who did not agree about a lot of things actually found that they did agree on shared values, like protecting their communities, sustaining our family farms, and giving the next generation a shot. And ultimately, these communities have changed here in Arizona an entire system of water governance. Groundwater is now protected here in 4 new rural regions for the first time in history. And that's the power of locally led collective action. So I recently asked one of my local leaders who I've worked with for years about what he hoped others could learn from his experiences changing the world around him. And he said, I hope we showed that even small communities like ours have the power to change our future. So my community, like many others around the world, we face a state of water bankruptcy. We are dependent on groundwater that is hugely vulnerable. And the decisions we make today as a community about water will determine what opportunities my daughter and her generation will have here in this place I call home. Communities all over the world are facing this same situation. So for you all, I would encourage you all in your regional youth statement to consider a few things. So one, groundwater, how central it is for our communities, for our futures, Indigenous sovereignty, community self-determination over local groundwater supplies, locally led collective action, and hope. So to kind of link back to the previous speakers, Omar and Dan, they mentioned research, showing up, doing your homework, organizing, and voting. I'll tell you in the water space, those are great action items for communities. Those translate really well. And when the communities I work with have gone down that path and done those things, they have been truly able to change the world around them in terms of bringing in new management, new authorities, more power to manage their water for themselves and for future generations. So just going back to the theme of this meeting, moving from community realities to multilateral action, I'll just say, communities can't just provide the realities. What local communities are accomplishing together today on water security, I believe is one of our greatest sources of hope for a resilient future. So I believe multilateral action now has the opportunity to actually catch up with that reality on the ground in communities. So I'll just say thank you, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here speaking. I appreciate the opportunity, and I do believe that my daughter's future is brighter because of you all and your generation. So thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Bridging rural and urban water governance is essential, especially as ecological stress impacts agricultural communities across the region. We now return to our in-person stage here in New York to hear from Joshua Frimpong, who is a climate justice and policy expert and adjunct lecturer at Fordham University School of Law, where he teaches environmental justice. Serving as the North America regional focal point for the UN SDG 7 Youth Constituency, he advances youth engagement in sustainable energy. As the executive director of the Eco Africa Network, he champions climate justice and clean energy transitions, leveraging his knowledge to inform policy and community resilience. Joshua, welcome. And this is a question that we prepared for you. As a legal expert and North America focal point for SDG 7, how can we use international law and SDG frameworks to force more ambitious climate action from our local governments here in North America and the Caribbean?
Thank you very much. You able to get up my slides on that?
Let me share. There you go. Yeah, we'll have to present it like this. Is it okay if we present it like this?
Yeah, sure works. Okay. First, don't worry about the man and the design. I'm the same person. I've just changed a little bit, but still me. And I think a lot of work has already been done by the speakers, and it set the tone well for me. To continue, I'm simply going to help us to explore how we can use international law and the SDGs to demand more ambitious climate action. And I know that the question on your minds, and as a matter of fact, the question that has been on the mind of many other people over the years is whether or not international law matters in our fight against climate change. Because we meet at Bonn, we meet at COP, we meet at UN General Assembly, regional conferences, youth conferences like this. And when we get back home, the problems persist. Our government's commitment to positive climate action does not meet the scale of the crisis. Communities remain vulnerable, climate finance falls short. So your questions are very legitimate. However, the answer to that question is yes. International law has and continues to shape our response to climate change. But before we delve into knowing how, I think that we may have a myriad of people on the call that we need to also provide some basic information for them to know. So we'll simply just touch on some important things. And basically, when we say international law, what do we mean? I think that because we're born into domestic environments, the idea that we already have is the architecture and the structure of how our domestic laws work. And so usually when people hear about international law, they're expecting the same thing to happen on that particular front. And so the first thing you need to know is that international law does not come bearing the same characteristics, the same architecture structure as our domestic law. And you can make the arguments that other scholars have made is international law, but we'll not delve deeper into that. Today, we're essentially looking at the basics. International law simply is the body of rules that govern the relations between states and international actors. How are they created? Just a little bit similar to our domestic laws. They're created through treaties. So you have the written agreement between the states. You have customary international law, which simply is saying that there's some practices that have been done by the state over the years. And so we tend them to have some legal obligation and general principles and sometimes to judicial decisions, which we'll look at later on, for example, the ICJ advisory opinion. But essentially, this is what international law is, and it formally creates rights, duties, standards, and procedure for states. So how two states act, what they do, the decisions they arrive at, the agreements they enter into, all of them evolve into what international law simply is. Can we have the next slide? But then what are climate international law? Is it any different from what international law generally is? No, it's not. It is only a specification, a particularization of what broadly international law is. So when we talk about international climate law, we're simply looking at those rules that address climate change, emissions, adaptation, mitigation that some of the speakers have already spoken about, and then the established obligations and expectations for the state. The unique thing about international climate law is that they don't operate in silos, so they intersect. You find that they operate alongside international human rights. You find them operating alongside, United Nations Convention on the law of the sea. So you see them intersect in many other ways. So you don't find one particular climate treaty that talks about everything, but you find that as we progress and as we develop new ideas, new treaties come, and then we find a way to merge them together. But then how are these laws made? I mentioned already that there's a distinction between how our domestic laws are made and then international law is made. So we have the treaty agreement between the states. It's adopted, signed, and then ratified. Ratification essentially means that the state is formally indicating its intention to be bound by that particular treaty. And when we say accession is that a treaty already exists before that particular party wants to enter into that particular treaty. But for accession, usually the treaty must have some provisions inside there that allow for that state to want to enter. And then, of course, entry into force. But the distinction here, which is key, what is important to know, is that a treaty being adopted and signed on international level does not automatically translate into domestic law. So you cannot print, for example, the Paris Agreement and walk to your mayor and say, Mayor, this is Paris Agreement, do that. It doesn't work automatically like that. It has a myriad of enforcement mechanisms, decentralized, that it adopts to implement a number of these laws that are made internationally. We'll look at them briefly. Come on, the next one. Then back to your question. So do we need international law? We do. Why? Because climate change is inherently transparent. What it means is that a ton of greenhouse gas emission that is emitted in the United States has far-reaching consequences to people who live farther away in Ghana, farther away in Africa, in Kenya, who have contributed nothing absolutely to that particular harm. And so if a phenomenon has its causes and consequences, transcending borders, then it essentially means that we cannot deal with it only with domestic law. It means we need an international community, international standards. We need some international law that would help shape our dealings of that particular issue. So yes, international law, we need international climate laws. It helps prevent that fragmented, every country for itself approach. That one time the United States wakes up and say, I want to do this on my own. You can also deal with yours on your own. Meanwhile, the problem that is emanating comes from the United States and affecting somebody farther away in Ghana. So we need that framework that prevents that self-centered approach to dealing with it. It also helps us create common standards and expectations, like we're all here with the same global objective, pursuing a temperature that is well below 2 degrees Celsius. That is an objective that international climate law allows us to work towards. It provides us legal basis for accountability and cooperation like the Paris Agreement, and it gives domestic advocates like us a framework to challenge our government's inaction. Why are you not doing A, B, and C? Because these are the commitments that you entered into on the global stage. So that's what international climate law allows us to do. Can we have the next one? Okay. And over the years, we've had a number of core international climate treaties. We'll run quickly through them. The UNFCCC, that's the Foundational Framework Treaty, establishing our formal recognition to climate change. We've had the Kyoto Protocol, essentially mandating legally binding emissions. We've looked at the Paris Agreement, which is of recent time, the primary document that is regulating our response to global climate crisis. Can we move on? We've also had the SDGs, and the amazing thing about the SDGs is that it helps us move away from just looking at environmental issues affecting us by also understanding that climate issues intersect with many other issues on development, on health, on education, on culture, on participation, on water, on hunger, on poverty, among many others. So that's essentially what the SDGs came in to do in 2015. And so you find that climate action is indicated in there as goal 13 as part of the major objectives that we're looking at reaching. And then, like I mentioned, there are other intersecting environmental frameworks. So the Montreal Protocol, we have UNCLOS, we have the Convention on Biological Diversity. We've also had landmark advisory opinions like the ICJ Advisory Opinion 2025, the International Tribunal on the Law of the Seas Advisory Opinion on how states have obligations to prevent marine pollution. And then we've had the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, that looks at states' obligation on the broader human rights perspective. But then we come to the most important part. How are they enforced? So we look at domestic implementation, and essentially means that once the laws have been made internationally and the states have ratified them, we look at implementing them locally. And a critical example of that is the New York Green Amendment Bill that has granted New Yorkers the right to clean air and water and healthy environment. The history before that amendment bill indicates that the New Yorkers were motivated by the increasing visibility of environmental injustice and the increasing incidence of extreme weather events that were attributable to climate change. And so what happens on the international front has a way of trickling down into our local terrain, and it empowers us to be able to say, hey, these are things that you've agreed, implement them locally for us to benefit from. We also have a number of them, like the domestic, for example, the case of Martha and Ontario in Canada, where 7 young people said, we don't agree to the objectives you set in the Cap and Trade Cancellation Act because it violates our rights and it increases the greenhouse gas emissions target that you're supposed to meet. And the court says, okay, sure, we'll hold it as justiciable. So it also allows domestic courts to say, okay, these are things you said internationally that you should abide by locally as well. So we hold you by it. Administratively, it allows us to also say that these permits that you're giving to these corporations to operate violates the objectives that you set internationally. And the critical example is the Shell case, where the Dutch Supreme Court said, Shell, reduce your emissions reduction by 45% by 2030. And although the court has overturned that particular decision, it gives us a precedent to know how a court would want to translate directly Paris Agreement from all the way at the time that it was made into a national occurrence, into a domestic terrain. We can also look at the treaty compliance, where Article 15, for example, of the Paris Agreement allows the PIAC to be able to review, assess the commitments that countries are making in terms of the NDCs. And many others. We can simply just move on. But how can we use it to achieve our climate objectives? We have to first advocate, and this is essentially the most important part of it. I think all the other speakers have touched on it briefly, that you need to show up, you need to do your research. You cannot be a good advocate if you don't have knowledge on the subject that you want to advocate on. So first, being informed is critical. It's a sine qua non to meeting your objectives as an advocate. But then again, if you leave the government, for example, to do the things that you want to do internationally, the government, when they come back, they will not indicate it internally. So our duty is to ensure that we force the hand of government to do the right thing. And the New York Green Amendment Bill is again another example that indicates that New York has voted and said that the initial environmental obligations are not sufficient for the growing world. So let's meet it. Again, implementation, ensuring that these goals are implemented, administrative accountability. And the last slide, so we wrap up. Litigation, like I said, we can test these issues in our courts, we can monitor, and then most importantly, the last thing, we mobilize. I'll end with this. Oftentimes when we talk about the ICJ's advisory opinion, we talk about it that the UN General Assembly referred it to the ICJ, and then we've had an opinion. We forget that that particular case was referred to the UN General Assembly by the Vanuatu government, which was initiated by students. It was initiated by students, not the government on its own volition, but it was by young people who said we're forming the Pacific Coalition to fight against climate change. They forced their government, and the government submitted it to the UN General Assembly. So we have the wherewithal and the capacity as young people to force change, to create the impact that we are looking for. And it starts with mobilizing. It starts with building that community with the same objective, the same aspiration, the same goal. So my task to you today is pick one government, pick one objective, pick one climate goal, and create the impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua, for highlighting the legal mechanisms that youth can leverage to enforce accountability at local and municipal levels and to advocate as well at the international level. And yeah, thank you for stressing out also the power that young people can have when trying to drive change. Finally, to round out our panel, we welcome in person Nikki Stauman, who is an expert in climate mobility and displacement with 10 years of experience at the intersection of migration, human rights, and peace building. And we have a question for you, Nikki. You focus on the intersection of human rights and displacement. How must our regional youth statement explicitly protect the rights of climate displaced population in our policies?
Do you mind sharing the slides?
There we go.
Thank you. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much. I think building off was a great transition. I'm sure you planned it that way, building off what Joshua said about the framework and international law and how we understand climate issues within international law is really important. And I work at, as you said, the intersection of human rights and displacement, and mostly on climate mobility, policy, and research with the Global Center for Climate Mobility. And so I want to bring a climate mobility lens to that conversation of international law and how we protect people who are mobile, who are moving, whether it's forced or voluntary, and how that fits within, what protecting the rights means, either from an international legal lens or from a local lens, or just kind of from a social well-being lens. And so what climate mobility essentially means is how climate impacts are affecting whether people move, whether they can stay in their homes, and also the conditions under which they do either of those things. And I think importantly also, we think a lot about climate mobility as international cross-border migration, but the majority actually happens internally, and a lot of people don't want to move. So a lot of times climate can also cause people, it can cause people to have limited opportunities to move, and make them not able to move even if they want to. And as we've just discussed a lot today, and I think Dan, you framed it really well, that these impacts are very, very unequal, particularly for climate vulnerable countries and communities that have contributed the least, where I'm going to be talking about in the region today, in the Greater Caribbean, they've contributed less than 10% of total greenhouse gas emissions, yet they're deemed as one of the most vulnerable regions. So it's very unfair, and additionally very unfairly impactful for youth, as we all know, and as I think you guys really framed today, the other panelists. And so I'm briefly going to share, you can go to the next slide. I'm briefly going to share what we've heard from young people and communities across the Greater Caribbean. I myself, of course, am not on the front lines, but I think it's important to talk about the US as you did today too, Chris. But we've done a lot of work with young people across this region, and so I'm going to share what some of them have shared, and also some concrete actions that we want to contribute to this statement. And so to ground this in evidence, one of the regional initiatives we undertook is called the Greater Caribbean Climate Mobility Initiative. I invite you all to look at it later. We can't get into the details today, but this looks at how basically climate change is shaping mobility across the region now and also in the future. And to do this, we combine for this report, for this interactive evidence, we combine climate mobility projection modeling, field research on the ground, and stakeholder consultations. And I led the research on the ground, so I'll focus particularly on what some of those communities told us themselves and some of the projections that actually aligned with what people are saying. If you go to the next one. Just a quick overview of the map and where we did this research. We did it across 14 locations in 6 countries, 3 mainland, 3 island, and this was between urban environments, rural, coastal, and origin and destination countries as well, including people who had moved, people who are considering moving, and people who wanted to stay at home. And so across these very different contexts, I will say the really big takeaway is that there was this tension between a strong attachment to place, people wanting to stay home, and also growing pressures and constraints on mobility. So the pressure to move, but also not being able to. If you go to the next slide. And I think that tension is particularly important for young people. We saw it really come out the most for them, because what we heard from a lot of young people is that young people make this clear connection between they're seeing the climate impacts on the ground. They may not identify it as climate change or use the academic terms we've been saying today, but they are seeing the climate impacts. But they also see the connection between that and declining job opportunities, declining access to services like health and education for them. And as traditional livelihoods become less viable, for instance, traditional livelihoods that people are used to being passed down to their families, ones in their generations, their communities they've done forever, as that becomes less viable, they're being the ones that are expected to leave their communities to go search for work. But also not everyone has the skills. They might not have been trained in that. They might not have the resources. They might not have the network in those destinations to look for those opportunities elsewhere. So when young people, so a lot of them are, constrained in that way. And also when young people leave, there's impacts on those people who stay. That could be elderly people. We heard this in Costa Rica. People were worried about there's not going to be young people here to carry on the farming practices and to carry on what we're doing here. And in indigenous communities in Suriname, for example, they were concerned about what this continued youth migration might mean for this intergenerational transfer of knowledge. I think, Dan, you alluded to this concept, but part of farming and working with the land is so inherent to indigenous communities and to their identity that they worried about how is this going to continue. And so, but at the same time, even though people want to stay in place, we have the stat here that young people also do want to have this desire to move, whether that's, for economic reasons or not. And about 42% of the people we surveyed said climate change would play a role in their decisions. And that's not to say it's the only factor. Climate is a compounding factor, but it does impact their decisions. And so the question isn't really whether young people should stay or should move. We can't say that, but it's actually whether they have a genuine choice. And I think that's the most important part that I want to iterate that goes into the statement. And how do we protect the rights? It's, do people actually have agency and a choice? And that right to stay becomes important here, because we need to be resourcing if people don't want to move. We need to resource people's ability to remain safely where they are with dignity. That means having access to a job, skills, education, services. And so that staying is actually a choice for them. You go to the next slide. That's just a summary of some of the key findings, but I do invite you to look more into the report. And so if choice, I'm framing this as choice being the issue here, what does protecting that choice actually look like, right? So the evidence that we gathered, the stakeholder consultations we did with over 1,200 people across lots of countries. We had a youth consultation as well. We worked with Young Joe. We worked with a lot of different organizations in the region that contributed to this. So with that all together, we put together this agenda for action for the Greater Caribbean. And we have 7 different big action points with lots of sub-actions below them, but categorized into these 3 themes. And I'm just gonna speak directly to the middle one under protect rights, because of this question, how we're talking about protecting people's choice and rights. If you go to the next one. So under these 3, we looked at how we need to protect the right to stay. We need to protect people's ability to do that, while also recognizing that in some contexts, it might be better for them to relocate when necessary or migrate. But climate change can also create immobility. We see that up to 6 million people could actually be deterred from moving due to climate impacts in their destinations. That's what some of our projections show. And so what this brings to mind is that it's really important that we have continued statehood and citizenship, especially for people affected by sea level rise, that we're concerning how people relate to the land and due process rights. Do they actually have ownership? Can they relocate? And planned relocation, and keeping in mind what people want when they move, what's important to them. And so this principle to enable people to stay where possible, we really need to ensure that their dignity and their rights are respected in doing so. If you go to the next one, and this relates a bit more to what Joshua was saying about the rights-based mobility approaches, because this brings in other international laws, other regional laws, but this right to stay that I'm talking about shouldn't be the assumption. We're not assuming people want to stay, we just want to protect them in whatever choice that they do make, right? So many young people want to move and they'll need to move. And by 2050, we projected that in a kind of worst case scenario, up to 8.2 million adults could move, and about almost a little less than half of those could be young adults between 20 and 39. So the principle here is that the rights have to travel with people during their mobility journey, whatever pathway that is, whether it's if they're internally displaced, whether if they're cross-border, and this means including humanitarian protection, making sure that we're incorporating those laws, the Cartagena Declaration, the Cartagena Plus 40 process, the Chile Declaration, these commitments that we've made. As Dan was saying, we make all these commitments, and as you were mentioning these commitments, but we need to make sure they're actually implemented. And making sure people have access to services and local inclusion, that they're actually integrated when they move and when they resettle. So for young people, this shouldn't mean losing access to healthcare, education, safety, or basic services. And the last one, if you switch the slide, under that umbrella of protecting rights, we need to be responding collectively to loss and damage. So I think a lot of my colleagues also here have talked about the damage that comes from climate hazards, and we see that up to 20% of GDP could be lost. An additional about 2 million people could be in poverty in kind of a worst case climate scenario. But what is also important here is it's not just economic losses, right? Loss and damage includes loss of place, loss of physical place. For Indigenous communities, place, they are one, right? And loss of culture, loss of Indigenous knowledge, loss of people's heritage and traditions, and social well-being. And we need to be able to quantify that kind of loss because that's just as important as economic loss. And this can be through disaggregated data, through tracking different funding, and we need to be able to mitigate loss and damage by, for example, strengthening healthcare systems, strategic litigation, as we've spoken about, holding polluters accountable, and finally, if we go to the next one. And so all of these that's just the end slide, but I would say that all of these recommendations that we have are very helpful in terms of a regional global lens, and it speaks to bringing in actors at the regional level and the national level and the local level, and involves a lot of actors. But when we talk about what we can do today and what we can all do in our organizations, I think it's really important that we make sure that youth are not framed as just being vulnerable to climate change, but also shaping the response. And I think all the speakers have mentioned this too, but that's not just consulting youth, it's giving them a platform, as we're doing today, and meaningful opportunities to influence policy. And I think, Dan, you said this earlier, they're a lot of times invited to COP, right? But then are you actually given a seat at the table to make those decisions? And I know in our own work, we're trying to create those spaces at GCCM. We have some fellowships. We support people participating in COP and other convenings. We're also giving seed funding to more youth-led initiatives. But for the regional youth statement today, I think in terms of this question that you've asked, I would make the core ask about protecting young people's choices. And so that means investing in their ability to stay, protecting their rights when they actually are on the move, when they are displaced, and also giving them meaningful power in shaping those responses, because they should have, as we say, the ability to stay with dignity, to move with dignity, and also determine their own futures.
Thank you, Nikki, for presenting the findings of your reports. Your insights on the capacity of agency were truly fascinating. And I also want to thank you for focusing on a region that usually doesn't get highlighted, the Caribbean. Your work makes it evident that we need to increase diverse perspectives, as I said to Dr. Kemen, and especially youth voices. Okay, then we can move forward with our breakout rooms. We'll transition into groups, and these rooms are designed for active policy drafting to build our regional youth statement. Here is what each room will cover and who will be leading them. The axis 1 will be addressing from pollution to solution. This is the way that we named the axis, the breakout room. The focus or the objective is to bridge local biodiversity protection, waste interception, and ocean health with topics such as food security and circular economy systems. And Mario will be moderating this session. The axis 2 will be on climate education, empowerment, and youth-led innovation. The objective is to universalize the Action for Climate Empowerment framework and integrate, to explore how we can incorporate technical capacity building into education systems. It will be moderated by Alfonso from AJUVES, Juventud Unida en Acción. And the keynote speaker is Marin Spence, trauma-attuned care navigator, mental health advocate, and a master's candidate in psychedelic research at the University of Exeter. And here in person, the third breakout room will focus on climate governance, finance, and justice. The objective is to explore how we can operationalize climate funding mechanisms and simplify bankability requirements for youth projects and securing direct access finance. Kathy, who is the founder of the Biogas Education Hub, an award-winning educator, will be presenting her project, and we will have a discussant, Alishba Khan, who will provide her opinion about the project, and hopefully we can find financial mechanisms that will ensure resources to these initiatives. Okay, so please jump into the group, the breakout room that seems more interesting for you. In the case of those who joined virtually, you have two options. The axis 1 on the topic is from pollution to solutions, and the axis 2 is about climate education and youth-led innovation and empowerment.
So we stay here for the climate justice. Do I?
I'm not on.
Oh, here's the Wi-Fi.
Oh. It's not showing options to join.
We already have people joining in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm not.
I'm not on the Zoom.
You don't have to. I will. Alishba will be following the session.
So I don't need to be using my computer. I've got
Uh,
got
I got that.
But hey, do you want to assign here the people to the?
Say that again. They can join.
I don't know.
They can join, or you can put them if necessary.
But we don't know which topic they prefer.
Like
Yeah.
we didn't get prompted
If
to
there's
join a
someone
room.
that has to be assigned.
Like on Nikki's screen, it's not prompting to join a room, so I don't know why.
Although we have here Chris, for example, joining systems. Alfonso, who is a moderator for the climate education and empowerment group.
I would just reopen the rooms because I think people are having trouble getting them.
Because yeah, they should like get the,
There's no notification, and so people are asking how to get into the room, so you just have to reopen them.
yeah, no, I think we can like
Just assign them.
assign them.
Or just reopen them, maybe.
We close them and open them.
Yeah,
again.
exactly, just
I
let it,
could add a third room, for example, and see if Nikki's account.
Okay.
sure.
Try it.
There's still no prompt, but there is a way to join it. You just have to go, oh, here, I think it's showing up now. Yes, there's an ability to join.
So everybody can go to the bottom of your screen and see breakout rooms and choose the breakout room that you want to join. So we have ecosystems, resilience, solutions to solution, and we have the education and empowerment. So please, if everybody can join any of those groups. So they want us to send people to the rooms. Mario, you have to choose, you go to the tab that says breakout rooms and you can choose which one to join.
So again, the instructions here in the bar below, we have a button that has 3 dots. Please click there and choose breakout rooms and select the one where you want to join. If you don't see that option, rename yourself on the Zoom, mentioning to in which topic they would like to contribute, and we can assign them. We have until 12:30 New York time to conclude with this phase.
Yes, great.
And Alishba will stay in the general room because we will need to have her here to listen to her.
Okay. I'm not sure if you can like hear from the.
Let's make it a hybrid breakout.
So no, you can talk with everybody that's still in this.
Okay.
That have not joined yet.
Well, just a reminder that we will transition to our breakout rooms. If anybody wants to join the ecosystems, resilience, and pollution to solution breakout room, please select that option in the bar below the Zoom. And if they want to join the climate education and empowerment breakout room, please select that option. And if they want to listen to Kathy here in the breakout room 3, which is about climate finance,
you can stay
in the general. And we don't have translations in the breakout rooms, interpreters. Okay, and we'll begin in 2 minutes. Just the computer. Because the microphones are. It's your top.
Yeah. We were on the news. Yes. We traveled for 2 weeks. Oh yeah. You didn't see us, but you stood out. Only white people know we saw. Yeah.
I'm going to introduce you. Okay, everyone, thanks for joining the breakout room 3 on climate governance, finance, and justice. For those who follow the session virtually, please remember that this is the breakout room 3. If they want to join another, the climate education breakout room, join the Axis 2 session. And if they want to join the session about titled From Pollution to Solutions, then join the Axis 1 breakout room. Here, our focus is to identify concrete fundable mechanisms to support community-led climate solutions and unlock direct access finance for youth. And to guide our policy consultation, we are joined by 2 exceptional experts. Let me introduce their bios. Kathy is an award-winning educator, permaculture designer, and advocate for small-scale biogas and community-driven energy solutions. She's based in Tilson, New York, and founded the Biogas Education Hub, making biogas knowledge accessible across cultures and climates. She teaches in the US, Haiti, and Belize, and leads online programs with participants across Africa. In 2023, she received the Women in Biogas Award for her leadership in biogas education.
Thank you so much. It is really such a privilege to be here. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today is what is small scale biogas, how it is an appropriate technology, as well as some upcoming pilots to really help support the people on the ground who are doing the work, which are biogas practitioners. So small scale biogas is what makes it effective and so powerful is its simplicity. These systems use basic inputs such as food waste and manures. They go through an anaerobic digesters, the microbes inside those digesters. They eat up the organic residuals that then convert it into nutrient-rich fertilizer, fuel, which is often used for cooking. And that fuel can be used to power a microgrid, a generator, and also offer people an economic opportunity to make money and generate income. It also provides safe sanitation and primarily used for as a clean cooking technology, as biogas, when it is burned, is considered a clean fuel. So what makes small-scale biogas so accessible is that it uses often locally sourced materials that require no electricity or complex upkeep, and they fit very easily into daily life. You could see a picture of a woman here cooking on biogas, and it basically functions the same as LPG. It's gathering the manures from the dairy farm to put into the digester. And you can see this beautiful, rich liquid fertilizer that is completely free of pathogens, and it's rich in nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And as you can see, it shows how this perfect fertilizer grows food, which is critical in many areas of our global majority areas where there is a fertilizer shortage, but guess what? There is no shortage of organic waste. So we have everything that we need, and used together at a community level, the small scale biogas systems with the right supports helps us to achieve all 17 sustainable development goals. So when I teach small scale biogas, I like it to feel familiar and not technical. So I often compare these systems to something people are familiar with, because when communities create their own language and metaphors, they build confidence and ownership. And that is critical, because if a digester is neglected, it stops producing. But when it is cared for, it gives back to people every single day. So, let's see. These are some different types of models of digesters that we typically see, in our tropical climates. So to the left is what's considered like a dome system that could be easily integrated into a septic system for a home. This is one of my colleagues in Haiti. He has a 55-gallon digester, which is ideal for kitchen waste. Another dome digester on the right. And on the bottom are what are called plug and flow digesters, in which food waste and manures go on one end and they travel through the other end. And these are relatively inexpensive, very low tech, and they do the job. So regardless of the model, the benefits remain the same, which is clean energy, less waste, safer sanitation, nutrient-rich fertilizer, all from simple closed loop system tailored to people's needs. Now, looking at this map to the left, it looks pretty bleak. This is like the volumes of charcoal that are used across the continent of Africa. So approximately 900 million people across the continent of Africa still lack access to clean cooking energy, often resorting to traditional, costly charcoal. And we're going to be talking about the true cost of charcoal with my next presenter, Rose Bazil, when she comes on. So biogas emerged as a transformative solution and with potential to impact the lives of 300 million people. But, looking at this slide to the left, this is my problem slide, is there are still many stumbling blocks. So across the continent of Africa, and we also see this in Haiti. I can personally speak from Haiti because that's where I've done the majority of my work. There is market failure. Many biogas systems in Africa were initially installed through development aid, and while that sounds admirable, it is inadvertently left to market and technology failure when these biogas projects were not supported by technicians. So it's very simple for something to go wrong. There could be like a little loop of water in the gas line and the gas is not flowing. And when a digester is just simply deployed somewhere and there's not a person to come and support you, then it kind of creates this negative feedback loop of it does not work. So the consequences include that communities that initially embraced the promise of biogas found themselves disillusioned, and the immense environmental and economic advantages of these blocks and systems really remain untapped. And so my right slide over here, this is where Biogas Unite comes in. And so you see this woman, she is carrying a B Energy biogas backpack and she wants to do business with you. So she cooks on biogas at her home and she is actually paid to cook on that biogas. So she does not own a digester. She takes her biogas backpack to where the farmer is, fills it up, brings it home. And we're going to be talking about how she is making money cooking on biogas. But first, to dive a little bit more into the true cost of charcoal and why this problem needs to be addressed, I have my colleague here, Rose Bazil. I've worked with Rose for many years on projects in Haiti. She is also part of Solar Cookers International, and I'm honored to be sharing her work. And she is going to talk to you about the cost of charcoal and the health implications for women and children.
Hello everyone, my name is Rose Bazil. I'm excited to be here with you today to talk about small-scale biogas. I'm thankful and honored to be invited to join the conversation and potential of small-scale biogas to help communities where cooking fuels is a daily challenge.
What brought you into the work of clean cooking technologies? specifically such as small scale biogas, and what gets you excited about it?
Let me get to the excitement first. When you introduced me, Kathy, when you introduced me to biogas, I was like, wow, this is a solution for Haiti's problem, for garbage, management, for fertilizer and for cooking gas, I said, this is a wow. And these women facing all kind of children facing all kind of health problem. I said, that's the solution for Haiti.
How do most families in Haiti cook their meals?
About 90% of family in Haiti use open fire, charcoal, and wood to cook their meals.
And why is charcoal and open fire so commonly used?
Because that's what's available, and propane is too expensive.
That sounds like a challenge. What are the main problems families face with traditional cooking, such as health, cost, and safety?
Well, open fire is very dangerous for burn, and we see a lot of children get burned and eyes problem with the women because of the smoke and lung problem. And it's expensive to go spend a lot of time to go and look for this, and it's expensive for the environment also because they're cutting the trees.
That is a high cost. As a pediatric nurse, what health issues do you see in children related to cooking, smoke, and unsafe stoves?
Asthma. Children has a lot of asthma attack, and children end up dead like that because when there is lack of health care, and then when they get an asthma attack, and then they get asphyxiated because of they can't get oxygen.
Thank you so much, Rose. We really appreciate hearing your perspective.
Thank you. I know biogas can bring a lot of solution, for Haiti's problem, to solve health problem, to solve economic problem. They can start their own business. So many things good can happen with small biogas for Haiti.
Thank you. Thank you, Rose. I just love always hearing her perspective. So this is one of the pilot programs that I wanted to talk to you about today. So believe it or not, repair is not a groundbreaking concept, but in the context of the current biogas landscape, it's actually revolutionary. So a biogas system never dies. As long as you keep feeding it and take care of it, it is going to continue to give back to you. And so what we're thinking about is beyond repair. Once the technology is in place, the focus fixed towards bringing together the biogas sector with local governments, banks, and the big players of the industry to collectively shape the future of biogas and clean cooking in Africa, and tackling the problem of 900 million people lacking access to clean cooking fuel. So what you see here in that little green box, that is a data logger. So basically the heart of this program is the kitchen. And so the data logger gives us a lot of information from the person who is using the digester and cooking. So the data logger could be just attached to a kitchen stove. So it could be somebody that is just using the biogas that they bring home. And we could be logging how much cooking time they're getting with the data logger. And it also provides feedback for people who are distributors for these digesters. It measures pressure output, tells how the person is feeding the digester, and it provides the installer with all of this wonderful feedback from the customers who also have the digesters to anticipate problems and to provide real-time customer service to them. So I am not Biogas Unite. Biogas Unite is actually founded by my dear friend and colleague, Catherine Putz. She is based in Germany, and her company is B Energy. So she is the one who innovated the B Energy backpack, as well as the aid-free model for biogas practitioners who work with B Energy. They essentially work directly with consumers. The consumer pays the installer to install the digester, purchase the digester, and also then to connect with Biogas Unite and have the opportunity to work with the program called CC Cash. And CC Cash is that program where people who are cooking have the data logger, can then be getting paid for their cooking time. So it is not enough just to deposit a digester. People need incentive, and people also need a means to pull themselves out of poverty. And that is like the whole message for CC Cash, is to provide that incentive. And so the next step is to be getting funding, hopefully from oil companies who are actually, extracting fossil fuels and increasing, emissions, to be paying for this, because the data is going to be collected and aggregated to have an actual number of people using, how much biogas they are using to be getting those payments. So hopefully, once this gets funded, we are really hoping this takes off. I think the most important thing right now for the small scale biogas industry is to be getting behind Biogas Unite, because its purpose is to also connect local people to their practitioners so they can get up and working with whatever biogas system that they have available. And this is a wonderful example right here of what that actually looks like in real time. So this is my friend Lazarus. He actually just won AD Hero of the Year with the AD Biogas and Industry Awards. And his work is so important in Zambia. And so he works a lot with schools, a lot with young people. And his main business that he does right now, he does installations at schools, and he also compresses the biogas so it can be used directly into a regular LPG stove. So he is one of those practitioners that people can connect with directly, if you're working in Zambia, to be gaining access to his expertise. And this is really what it's all about, really supporting the people on the ground who are already doing the important work. And so a project that I'm working on with Lazarus, I did a problems and solutions survey with 15 biogas practitioners. A specific area of need they also had was like marketing and promoting their business. And so I am working with a Haitian artist named Tony Louis, and our pilot is powering clean cooking with comics. And so the purpose of that is for biogas practitioners to have an easy way to share their work via WhatsApp. Do we have time to play that really quick? Yeah. Because this is basically it. Loading. Oh, there's no sound. I don't know if they can hear it. Oh, we have to switch screens. Oh, I see. Can't get it to play, that's okay. Do people, oh, there you go. All right, see if it'll play.
Can't hear anything.
Well, it's okay. We can go back to the slides because I made my slides shareable. So if you can share the link for my slides so everybody who's here today can see them. So we can just go back to the slides, that's all right. I'm almost done on the last slide. There you go. Last slide. All right, very good. So thank you. And, you know, I imagine, you know, when I think of synergy and solutions, I think of, you know, this character that we're working on creating together, Maya, who right here in this picture is cooking a pot of Haitian jumu. And she is sharing with her friend Tanima. And this idea of guardians, that guardians are people who protect something they love. And this whole project is really centered around Lazarus and his work that he does with youth. Being able to have, you know, these comics to share with students at the school and, you know, coloring books so they can go home and show their family, like, this is how they cook food at their school. And we can bring that to fruition when we support the biogas practitioners who are always doing the work and inspire our communities through art. Thank you so much.
Can I share the link to the video in the chat if anyone wants to consult it? They can.
And they can have the slides too.
And I'll share the
link for the slides. Perfect.
Okay, now we'll have Alishba, who is an accountant and international sustainable finance expert with experience across Asia, Europe, and Africa, specializing in ESG reporting, climate governance, and disaster risk financing, having held leadership roles with the UNDP, the FAO, and Asian Development Bank. Alishba, based on the scalability challenges that Kathy shared, could you outline which specific government, NGO, or multilateral funding mechanisms youth delegates should be targeting to make these projects bankable and resource secure for institutional donors? Alishba, you have the floor.
Hello, everyone. And thank you, George. So my name is, as George has introduced, my name is Alishba Khan, and I'm from Pakistan, and I'm chartered accountant by qualification. So first of all, thank you for having me today and allowing me to provide my advice on how to make a community biogas initiative bankable. So my work has been focused on translating complex climate and development challenges into practical farming and financing solutions. So my suggestion, or coming from my experience and the exposure I have across different regions, I would use a biogas unit as a practical example of how a relatively small community initiative can become investable. The central lesson is that the donor and financial institutions are not only looking for a good idea, they need to see clear problem, and financial institutions are, they really want to invest in innovative ideas and those ideas which support the community or solve the problems. So for that, there needs to be a clear problem statement, then measurable outcomes and implementation model, local community ownership, and a pathway to scale the small initiative. So my suggestion would be to start with the problem in a very simple term. For example, think about a biodigester like a cow's stomach. So I'll give a little different example from what my fellow colleague has just shared in her presentation. So how does a cow's stomach, as taking it as an example, as a biodigester would work? It needs daily attention. It consumes organic waste, the kitchen waste, garden waste, and it produces useful output. For example, clean cooking fuel from the cow dung, organic fertilizer, again from the cow dung, and that could also be used as a source of potential electricity. So the investment problem is not necessarily how do we build more digester. It is also how do we make the system already built work sustainability. So sustainability has to be center of the entire concept that we would be building to attract the financing from the potential financiers. That is where biogas unit has interesting proposition. Rather than treating every failed digester as a new infrastructure project, create the service infrastructure around existing assets. For that, you have to map, then report, then match with technicians, then repair, verify, and ensure the maintenance. As that has been explained in the presentation just before my talk. This changes the preposition for a donor as well. Instead of saying, give us money to promote biogas, the project can say, work. We will definitely government the system, restore them, create local technician jobs, verify functionality, and generate data showing which interventions would be viable and financially sound. So I have tried to give you an overview from different lens that how this initiative should be taken, specifically when we have very small units. We focus on small community, small setup, and what actually the financiers or the funders they look for. Since we are associated with youth, so where does the youth or the small community or the small organization we have just seen in the previous presentation, they will actually find the money. So there are various options. First, NGO and philanthropic fundings. Youth organizations and the small organizations in a small community setup should target climate, clean energy, livelihood, and food system programs rather than simply searching for youth or small grant fundings. A biogas project can potentially fit several thematic funding windows simultaneously. As I have explained earlier, that biogas unit it supports various ideas and various solution to the problems through the core dung, as I just gave the example of biodigester like cause stomach. Secondly, multilateral climate and development financing. Depending on the scale and the country, relevant pathways can include GEF small program, GCF accredited entities, UN programs, development bank technician assistance, and clean cooking and energy assess programs. So there are various programs running which support the small, the small scale initiatives, and they also plan and intend to support the next phases or the continuation of those small scale programs, which could be taken as a pilot programs if they are able to produce the desired outcomes. Then moving to the next, another idea, the third option could be the government mechanisms. Again, depending on the country, the region, and the setup. So that for that, there should be mapping of the projects that we intend to take forward against the existing national priorities. For example, clean cooking, renewable energy, waste management, rural development, climate adaptation, agriculture, and employment. As the government department may be able to provide land, technical staff, data, co-financing, equipment, or access to communities, even where it is or it cannot provide the entire cash requirement. So this would be really supportive. Then another option or pathway could be corporate and the blended financing. So energy companies, banks, carbon market actors, and companies with ESG and climate commitments can potentially support deployment, technician networks, digital platforms, and result-based incentives for such initiatives. This is particularly attractive when the project can demonstrate carbon reductions, energy savings, jobs, and household level economic benefits. So, since I come from the chartered accountancy background, so we have IFRS S1 and IFRS S2, which talks about the climate and the sustainability reporting and is now mandatory for the public and the private sector companies around the globe where it is applicable. So for that, the companies who have to follow and report according to the international accounting standards, following IFRS and also following as a part of the international accounting standards, IFRS S1 and S2. For them, these initiatives, this support, the financial support to such initiatives, support their reporting, and they are this is also supportive for such private sector corporates and the private sector corporates and the other organization who are supposed to report ESG and CSR by the end of the year and show how they have supported the environment and the community development. So finally, I would just give you an overview. I hope I have few minutes to conclude my talk. So how would such projects could be made viable when positioning when you are putting in the position and when you are presenting it to the financial institutions to attract the financing. So I would recommend that the project developers should prepare concise two-page investment concept paper and not a 50-page or 60-page long proposal initially. And it should answer, some 6 basic questions. 1, what problem we are solving? Second, who benefits and how many people? Third, what exactly will the money finance? Fourth, what measurable results will be delivered? Fifth, who will operate the project after the grant ends? Six, how can this model be replicated? The indicators could be very concrete. Rehabilitated units could also include the technicians trained, as we have been discussing the technicians as the center of the entire theme. The most important shift is from an activity proposal to a result proposal. So the proposal should be designed in a way that it shows concrete outcome in context of financial development, in context of economic viability, and in context of community support and the community development. So donors are more interested in we will like they are more interested in number. For example, we could quote it like this: we will restore 500 systems and demonstrate 80% more functionality after 1 year. Then simply stating, we will conduct awareness workshops, which could not give or provide defined quantitative numbers in context of outcome and output. So on closing, I would just share a message that the real lesson from the biogas unit is that the community or the youth, they do not necessarily need to start with a multi-donor project. They need to start with a creditable 6 to 12 months demonstration that proves something investors care about and they show interest in. If you demonstrate that 50 or 500 dormant biodigesters can be brought back into the operation, that local technicians can maintain them, and that the household saves money, and that the emissions are reduced, the carbon emissions. So this would be really supportive, and that the data can also be independently verified. This is very important because this supports the monitoring and evaluation post implementation of the project, and will also support in making a concept for the next phase of the project. So for that, if you are following, such guidelines, then you have moved from the community idea to the investment proposition. And that would be, my final remarks to bridge between the community actions and institutional finance. Start with small, measurable, rigorous, and provide the ownership to the local communities. I hope this would be concrete guidelines for anyone interested in developing the concept papers to attract the financing for such nature of projects anywhere in the globe. Thank you. Over to you, George.
That was really useful. We were gonna answer a question regarding the regional youth statement, but we could incorporate based on both participants. Although, given the lack of time, I will summarize what I understood based on both participations. And we'll ask the rest in the breakout rooms to come back and report what they learned, what was shared.
Yeah, absolutely. We thank you everyone for being here. It's a real honor to talk about these topics and to get to the thick of it together. So we designated Christopher to share some notes about what we talked about and kind of share that with a larger group. You ready, Christopher?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, I'm Chris. I'm just a meeting student. I was in the climate education meeting and I just wanted to share some notes about what we discussed. I'll try to be concise. So we mainly talked about how climate education needs to be a lot more encompassing. That's how we opened up with. We need to teach them students in this case, like the practical side. So like not just awareness in general, but like organizing, what climate budgets are, how to establish projects. And we need to like have agency beyond just awareness. And we need to like shift our thinking towards like macro actions, like what our communities can do, what our governments can do. And so we talked a lot about the Action for Climate Empowerment framework. So we just abbreviate as ACE,
Hello,
which
everybody.
this helps bridge this gap between awareness and agency. And we also stated that this extends upon like broad understanding. So like it talks about like the international side, talks about climate literacy beyond like individual anecdotes. So that whole ACE framework and like how to actually embed that into curriculum through existing initiatives was a really interesting conversation. And then also about like how we can like build understanding about interpreting climate data and integrating that into institutional policies. And then from there, like on the institutional side, that's where sort of bridge into a conversation about like our own communities, because we have people in the meeting who are like from New York, people like myself are from Bermuda, and how that looks like in different places. And so on that institutional side, we then had a discussion about how like this education curriculum about building climate education, the big thing is that it needs to be like introduced equitably. Because I know in Bermuda, like only happens like we have classes, but they're only certain schools because they're only limited to public schools and not the private curriculum because of wealth inequality. And so we really need to make sure, and like other federal structures, not to go through every single country individually, but the United States, like education at a state level, you have like certain political administrations that are more anti-climate change than others at the state level, which affects which classes are taught. And so we really had a discussion about how, like, yes, climate is political, but at the level at which we implement it, like the actual structures which embed them, we need to make sure that's depoliticized there. Because yes, we can have this climate curriculum through ACE, through these initiatives, but it's really important that this happens through like something that's not seen as like a political matter or something to argue over, something that's only public versus private. It needs to be something that's really introduced equitably and across different communities, because that's the only way that you can really build that intercommunal connections. So that was basically our entire discussion. It was pretty encompassing, but it was just about how multifaceted climate education is, how we need to embrace how multifaceted it is. But we also need to embrace it in a way where we don't get caught up over like its politicization and just make sure that it's equitable. So I would say that was basically everything we discussed.
Thank you, Chris. I really liked that you stressed out this need to consider education as a rights issue and not necessarily as a political matter. Okay, now I'll call Mario to report on his breakout room from pollution to solution.
I hope you hear me very clearly. I'll try to turn on my camera, although my bandwidth is a bit low, so I hope you're hearing me very clearly. Thank you to everyone who joined our session. I do appreciate you all for looking at the intersectionalities between pollution and ecosystem restoration and how we look
It's
on all
me,
of
but
this.
I'm not hearing anything.
Are you not hearing me?
We
Are
can
you
hear
still
you.
not?
We can hear
Okay,
you
good.
perfectly.
Okay, sorry. Thank you very much. All right, so I want to thank you all, for joining today's session. Our session was from the Axis One, from pollution to solution. The the group, had diverse views on many of our major issues. I'm looking at, how we look at pollution, not just from a solution-oriented aspect, but that we can utilize technology as a means to addressing pollution and our community can be involved. One of the points that we highlighted was the need for coordination, coordinating a community-informed pollution and policy baseline for pollution prevention that integrate local community as a solution to upstream pollution challenges, which simply means that we don't just wait on the community to respond, but look at it from before the dumping starts. Then there was a call for much more greater partnerships between cities and communities, schools, and other institutions to identify chronic illegal dumping dump sites, because the dump sites are already there, right? And alternatively, we can utilize AI as a tool to integrate dump sites and early leakages before storms and other natural disasters, that which results in dumps polluting the waterways and which goes into our ocean. We should also look at the what we consider as a monitor, intercept, prevent, and measure mechanism that can be used to monitor our waterways, so from our upstream areas or from the starting areas, from our urban areas, that which ends up in the marine environment, to looking at how we do prevent the solution or how do we intercept, and we look at the technologies which are already there. The Of course, the ocean. For example, in Jamaica, we have the Ocean Foundation and other ocean institutions which have already implemented technologies to intercept waste before it actually ends in our marine environment. And then one of the other point that we would have raised was the need to elevate water issues and water issues broadly, but not just pollution, just water issues broadly. Because once you're polluting your water, in many cases, people will not want to pollute their water. So we need to have much more discussion at the broader level and including at the climate level so that people can know and, share much more in discussion about that. And, from at this level, we should look at it as a major social governance issue. And when you say social governance issue, it simply means that we're having an all of society approach in terms of having the community at the core of it, having the institutions at the core of it, having our cities or our subnational government at the core of it, and knowing that water is essential to all of us. And try to find ways to empower the community to respond, and having them working together to ensure that we limit the dump sites which now have impacts on water resources, have impacts on drainage and other systems which have water entering our marine environment. So these are just some of the things that we would have spoken about earlier in our discussion.
Thank you, Mario. And finally, I'll present the conclusions from the breakout room 3. And we can clap. In breakout room 3, Kathy presented her project about biogas, and Alishba provided feedback, issuing recommendations to make the project fundable and bankable. The question that we wanted to answer was that given the funding gaps discussed, that were discussed, what concrete recommendations can we include in the regional youth statement to demand that governments simplify bankability requirements for small-scale community projects and establish direct access funding channels for youth initiatives? And to directly address the funding gaps for youth and community initiatives, I, as the moderator of the breakout room, because we didn't have a chance to discuss the topic, I believe that the statement can present 2 primary recommendations based in Kathy and Alishba's insight, the regional youth statement. And the first would be to simplify bankability by recognizing service infrastructure and digital data. As Kathy noted, past projects collapsed when aid merely provided standalone hardware without local repair capacity. And Alishba added that institutional financiers, investors, require measurable low-risk models. So the regional youth statement should demand that governments shift creditworthiness criteria from rigid balance sheets to funded maintenance networks and automated data logging that proves real-time operational viability. And the second point that I identified is that we need to establish direct access funding channels to bypass large-scale bureaucratic barriers. Youth innovators cannot navigate the complex compliance criteria designed for large infrastructure projects. And to bridge this gap, governments and multilateral funds would need to create dedicated small grant windows with streamlined due diligence supported by in-kind public co-investment, such as land and technical staff, and the corporate ESG partnerships to channel capital directly to grassroots teams. This should be done in partnership and not from the top to the bottom. That's what we have as conclusions for the breakout room 3. Okay, and to begin our closing remarks, we have 10 minutes left. I invite Juanita Ariza Ginsberg to share her reflections. She's the coordinator of the National Water Network in Colombia, and she won an award by the General Assembly because of her role promoting the right to the environment at the international level. So Juanita, the floor is yours. And your microphone is muted.
Thank you so much, dear. Do you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Thank you so much, dear Jorge, and everybody for participating today at the Regional Conference of Youth organized by us. It is a pleasure for the National Water Network in Colombia, as well with our allies, from the National Water Corporation and more than 3,000 leaders in our country, but as well the amplification of the message that we were able to deliver through the Latin American Mayor Group, and especially the Environmental and Ecological Justice Group, from which I am the focal point. I would like to address the importance of the different topics that we have acknowledged here today, and many of them are related with the importance of recognizing the environmental justice as a topic of the youth, as a proper workspace, and the reason for leadership of all the youth worldwide, as well the recognition of water. That's why we highlight as well our campaign, Water for Future, where we invite all of you to integrate and acknowledge all of the achievements that the National Water Network, along with the member allies, have reached through the last years, as promoting the creation of the National Water Agency of Colombia, the International Water organism from Latin America and the Caribbean, and of course that we need to integrate it with the north of America and all the global north as well. It's important to highlight the comments that were given around the international law as the natural means to fortify and strengthen the academical work from all of the local leaders, as we heard on the examples of the School of Government. And finally, I would like to address that it is important that we come out of this RCOY meeting with the possibility of creating a coalition. As you mentioned, Jorge, I had the opportunity to be in that exact room, in that the Baha'i United Nations headquarters room, in 2023, when we received the prize for having recognized the right to a healthy, clean, and sustainable environment, just in that room where you are today. And it gives me so much pleasure to be able to address to you right now. And I believe that the Regional Conference of Youth is the perfect space that we can push forward a new coalition. So my invitation for you today is that we do it. I want to invite all of the NGOs that are here with us today, all of the groups, all of the leaders, all worldwide, so that we can create a new coalition of youth based on the topics that have been discussed today here, the highlights, the proposals, the objectives that have been recognized today, so that we can push forward the different work that we need to do together for the Conference of Climate Change, but as well some others, like the Conference on Biodiversity that is taking place in Armenia, the Desertification Conference that's taking place in Mongolia, and of course the Water Conference that will be taking place at the Arab Emirates. So it is my pleasure to have been joining you today in this process, and I hope that with our NGO as well that has a ECOSOC status, that we can bring forward all of the different proposals and solutions that you all leaders need, but as well we want to be a coalition for the resolution of the environmental conflicts related with youth and with different social groups. That's from my resume. I hope that I make it all integrated, and I also want to invite the group to develop a second session all in Spanish, another third all in French, and a fourth one all in Portuguese, so that we can cover all of the main languages of the region. So thank you very much, and we continue working. This is UN for People.
Thanks, Juanita. I like that proposal. And yeah, we can clap.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, while
thank
this
you.
event aims to focus on North America and the Caribbean, we purposefully invited Juanita from Colombia to provide closing remarks, also to rethink what North America is and why we divide the regions as such. Colombia is situated directly on the equator. Colombia sits right in the middle. It is not the north, not the south. It serves as an opportunity to reflect and to think about what encompasses this region and to take advantage of Colombia's unique geographic, ecological, and geopolitical position as a bridge across the hemisphere. And by bringing an equatorial perspective into our leadership today, we break down regional stories and regional silos and recognize that climate impacts from ocean systems to human mobility, and that has no boundaries, no artificial borders.
Oh, also, Jorge, if you allow me to add just one thing, I will also call for, you know, that in Colombia we just had an earthquake of 7.4, and we have thousands of victims. So also, I would love to have the opportunity to call you as well for your solidarity. Through Jorge, through all of us, we will be sending you the information where you can also add to the victims of the earthquake, and of course that your support, your knowledge will be of much help to support the local community's restoration. Thank you.
Thank you, Juanita. Now I invite Jade Yang, who is the Climate Peace and Security Officer at Agora and a Master of International Affairs candidate at Columbia University, to share closing remarks as well.
Thanks, Jorge, and thank you, everyone. Sorry I couldn't join in person today. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you again. Translating frontline struggles into formal policy demands requires rigor, persistence, and unified vision, as we've seen today. The draft outcomes generated in our breakout sessions today provide a clear, actionable roadmap to advocate for direct access funding, climate governance reform, and community-led resilience at multilateral negotiations. This statement belongs to every delegate who contributed here today. So thank you for your leadership and commitment to intergenerational climate justice.
Thank you very much, Jade. We have 2 minutes, so I would like to know if Roberto from Youth Building the Future Global is here and would like to conclude the session.
Yes, I am here, Jorge. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone that has spoken prior in this incredible session. I'm gonna take just 1 minute just to also comment this important of the resurgence of populism across the Americas, spanning both left and right wing spectrums. And you know, thinking about and really putting this on the table, because we not only talk about collaboration, because the NGOs and all the organizations that has participated and has articulated this huge effort for RCOY North America, we'd also have in our victims, or you know, these narratives that frequently prioritize the energy sovereignty and talks about climate change and climate change deniers and all those messages of negationism on climate. It's taken years of I'm sorry. I got distracted by the comments. It's taking years of action in the Americas specifically. So I think that collaboration not only is the articulation of the organizations, but also that transdisciplinary action. And I'm happy to hear that a lot here in these sessions, not only that political view and that environmental view and that science view, but also really taking it as a collaborative action in something that really affects everyone, not only in one country or one continent or one side of the world, but everyone. So COVID-19 prevent that. We're still coming from those effects and those those step backs that we've taken back there. So thank you so much, and that's an invitation just to keep the momentum and to keep really articulating beyond NGOs and transdisciplinary actions. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you to all our distinguished speakers, keynotes, delegates, and organizing teams. Also to the interpreters, they did an excellent job. And the RCOY 2026 is officially adjourned.
Bye-bye, everyone. Until next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Congratulations.
Okay, and for those here at the back, we need to leave the room